Welcome to Two Girls, One Pod. We're recording from Wurundjeri land. Welcome to our third ep of our special Best of Holiday Bonuses. The wonderful Rosie Waterland is on our bonus ep today, and we are chatting all about her memoir and her relationship with her mum. Oh, great episode. Plus, I'm replaying a bit of my chat with the incredible Victoria Devine, who gave us the best advice for women when it comes to protecting their finances. I want to talk about your other projects that you've done in the past. You also had a podcast. It was an award-winning podcast. Mm-hmm. Now, before that podcast, you had a book called The Anti-Cool Girl, which is one of the best books I've ever read. Like, it was just such an enjoyable, real, honest, vulnerable, awkward.
Yeah. Thanks.
Just, it was so relatable, you know. I've always looked at you and you're so very similar to me. You know, we're both fat women. We're both funny. We're both really smart.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I mean, our
upbringings
are quite different, but, you know, lots of trauma for both. But then your mum, who, you know, is a really interesting woman,
That's a nice way of putting it. Yes, interesting woman.
Yeah, she's interesting. She's definitely that. So, and, you know, that's as much as I can say about someone else's mother.
Yeah.
But you started your podcast from the back of the Anti-Cool Girl because your mum says your memoir was a lie. So you had a podcast called My Mum Says My Memoir is a Lie. And that was one of the best podcasts I've ever heard as well.
Yeah, well, thanks.
So that was so interesting because you did that with your mum.
I did. So, yeah, my memoir, The Anti-Cool Girl, came out when I was 27.
How old are you now?
I just turned 37.
Okay.
So, yeah, about a decade ago now. Or maybe 26. I think it was 2015 that it came out. So, yeah, I was about 26. And I would never have written a memoir that young if I hadn't had something to say. And, you know, I had this quite traumatic, as you put it, interesting childhood. My parents were drug addicts, alcoholics, and my sisters and I spent a lot of time shipped to different places and being wards of the state and all that kind of thing. And so I wrote about all of that in the book, not thinking – my dad died when I was young, so he wasn't a factor. I thought my mum would never read it because at the point I wrote it, her alcoholism was so bad. Like, we were told – for a couple of years running, like, she's not going to survive the year. Like, she may have 6 months, like her liver damage and all that kind of thing. She was so unwell. And so my sisters and I had kind of resigned ourselves to the fact that, like, we were already grieving that she was kind of gone. She certainly didn't have the capacity to read a book. So I wrote it thinking she would never read it. And then, as she does from time to time, neck minute, record scratch, she got sober. After a particularly, like, she reached a place with her health where she very nearly died. She was in hospital for 6 weeks, and that kind of kicked something in her brain to stop drinking. And so, yeah, she got sober and read the book, and wasn't pleased.
What do you, can you tell me, do you remember her first reaction?
She has a complicated, ambivalent kind of reaction to the book. So she's very excited that I wrote a book that, you know, was so successful and it was a bestseller. And she likes that, you know, I had achieved this level of, I guess, kind of fame and success. But then she didn't like all this before what I said about her. Yeah. So she said she had an old friend from school who told her, Lisa, don't read it. And so that made her go, I'm reading it.
I have got to read it.
And, you know, there's unflattering stuff in there about her, about my childhood and how it went. But I said, you know, my one rule when writing the book was I will only write what I remember. So even if my sister said to me, oh, I remember blah, 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 I'm like, well, I'm not putting that in because that's your memory. It's not mine. So I just wrote it how I remembered it. And she just said to me, like it's bullshit. It's bullshit. Like none of this, it didn't happen that way. Rosanna. She's the only one who calls me Rosanna. Oh, nonsense, Rosanna. Yes. That didn't happen. It was so fascinating to me that two people could have completely opposing memories of the same events. And I had loved Augustine Burroughs' book, Running with Scissors, that he wrote about his childhood. And he talked a lot about his people in his family completely denying that it was true. And so, you know, the creator in me thought, like, let's make something out of this. And so I said, let's do a podcast. And we basically recorded this podcast called Mum Says My Memoir is a Lie. Straightforward. And each episode is me reading through each chapter of the book, and we'll read one chapter and then just talk about what is and isn't true according to her, me, whatever. And it was a lot. It was a lot to do. It was it was emotionally intense and hard. Part of me wishes, like, the success of it was amazing. You know, it's been downloaded, I think, it's close to 12 million times now. It's still, even though it was a closed thing of 25 episodes because it was just the chapters in the book, it still gets thousands of downloads a month, like, even though it finished years ago. It won, the Aquifer Podcast of the Year. It did so well, but emotionally sometimes I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have done that, you know, just because you get a lot of power in owning your narrative, and particularly for me as a writer, as a storyteller, writing that memoir was me saying, this is what happened, this is what I remember, and getting to own that narrative was really important. And then I essentially kind of gave it away. Like I said, I gave the person who abused me or neglected, whatever you want to call it, the cause of my difficult childhood, I let her sit in front of me and deny the narrative that I had got a lot of power from. So it's an incredible piece of art, like, to listen to. It's an amazing, I can appreciate that it is a really incredible podcast. But emotionally, I still sometimes go, I don't know if that was the best choice. So it's hard. I'm proud of it, but I don't know.
I know exactly what you mean. You know what I take from that one statement and one question. The statement is, so many people that write about other people in the real world never, ever give that other person the right of reply. Yeah. And that's a really big thing for me. I don't like to talk about other people without at least giving them the right of reply. But memoirs they're just not geared that way. Yeah. But my question is, how did it make you feel when she just constantly denied? Like, I mean, apart from what was on, also the fact that podcast, it's ageless, and that's why it's just going to be downloaded for the rest of eternity, I believe, because it's so ageless. Like, it's not time stamped. I mean, you have to listen to this because it's current events, and you know, it's going to appeal to so many people on so many levels. But you know, your mum's, I don't know, when I listen to it as someone who also has a parent who used to do the exact same thing. That did not happen, Yvette. Yeah. The person that calls me by my full name. You are just making that up. You know, I haven't done that publicly, and you have. The way I listened to it was, your truth was the sober one. Yeah. And it was the one that, I don't care how old you were, a memory is a memory. And for a child, you don't have a lot of experience to mind. So therefore you have this distinct memories of things for how they happened, and not even how you could articulate how you felt at the time. You only know you felt how you felt. Then you, as an adult, could articulate what you felt as a child. But what you had as a child was a memory that was so real and so spot on. So for a parent to be able to have a rebuttal, I think was a really great thing, a choice to make creatively, because it helped so many people when they're listening to say, this is how it is in so many homes when the parent is so defensive and then becomes on the offence, on the attack, because they're so mortified by the reality of the truth of what they've done. That and then also you have they weren't sober. They have the recollection may not even be there, that they've created their own memories. So, your mother had that and that, but my question, going back to my statement and then a question for you, was even now, like, how do you reconcile being told to your face, you're a liar, by the one person who should be your everything?
Yeah, well, she has said worse to me, but...
Isn't that interesting the way you just said that? You made it like, well, there's worse.
Yeah, there's worse. It's a lot of everything you just said. Our running joke was, you were drunk, well, you were 6. So how do you, that was but my older sister and I went very different directions in terms of how our trauma manifested. She remembers nothing. Like, I tell her things like the night my mother was chasing us with a butcher's knife and we had to jump out a second-story window and go find neighbours. My sister has no memory of that, and it is one of the most vivid memories in my mind. I think it's because I have a post-traumatic stress disorder so I still get flashbacks and I get things like that. But for me, the memories, it's like they're tattooed on my brain so vividly. And for my sister, they disappeared. They've gone somewhere. And so I knew that I remembered things very clearly. I think part of it as well was, even when I was a kid, I loved writing and storytelling as a kid. I knew I would write a book one day. Even then I knew it was content. I was like, keep it up, you guys. Like, I'm clocking all of this. I'm filing this away because, I even had a sense then that it was a story. But I think also very much what you said about not being able to face the truth is a big part of what my understanding was of what she was doing. I don't doubt that there are some things she remembers differently to me. And, there's that age-old saying, like, there's 3 versions of the truth or whatever. There's your version, their version, and whatever's in the middle. Whatever, sure. But I do think also for her, she probably does remember a lot of it the same as me, but to accept that for her, to admit that, she can't go there. No. She can't change it, and it's too painful to open that box and know what you did and what you put your kids through. So I think for her as well, it's self-protection.
Absolutely.
So I was coming at it with that understanding also. Like, I've been in therapy a long time. I started getting PTSD symptoms when I was 17. So by the time I did this podcast with her, I'd been in therapy for like 15 years. And so I sort of was able to approach it with a bit of insight in that sense. And, also I think what helped is that essentially I was the host of the podcast. Yeah. So I was very mindful that I couldn't just let it devolve into raging arguments because I was the one driving the bus. Yeah. Like, I would read the chapter while my mum sat there, and then I'd say, so what do you think of that? Like, it was my job to ask questions and to keep it moving and to, so I also, that kind of, I think, helped keep me emotionally, at least in the studio, a step back from it, because I had a job to do. Like, I had questions to ask. I had stuff that I wanted her to, she's not, media trained or anything like me. So it was my job to help her articulate what she wanted to say by asking her the right questions and stuff like that. So it was a combination of a lot of things that allowed me to sit there and do it. But then, like I said, in the years since, I've thought, maybe that wasn't the best choice, but the artist in me, if I had the chance to go back, I'd do it again. Good. So I would do it again. So, because it's one of the things I'm proudest of that I've ever created and done and made. So, not easy, but it's such a beautiful piece of art.
Oh, you're so right. And I'm really, really glad that you said that. And that dichotomy, probably not I question whether it was the best decision, but I would do it again. Thank you, because it is so incredibly helpful for so many people. How's your relationship with her today?
It just comes with a lot of boundaries. She's not drinking now as far as I know, although sometimes I suspect she is. But
how far away does she live to you?
She lives out west in Sydney, and I'm sort of close to the city, so we're about 40-minute drive from each other.
Each other often?
Not really. And, I have rules like I won't answer the phone after 5 p.m. I won't if she gets belligerent in text messages, I just sort of straight away say, I'm going to block you for 24 hours because, because she's got it's hard to pin down a diagnosis with her. A lot's been thrown around over the years, like borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder. Some people have said bipolar. Yeah. Other people, you could just say trauma. Who knows? But she's just not an easy woman. And the boundaries have to be strict, especially when she's drinking. But I will say one thing that has really turned things around for her is are her grandchildren. My older sister, Rhiannon, has 5 kids, and my mum really loves looking after them and having them in her life. And I think it's a big reason why she doesn't drink as much as she used to, because to be around for them and to be sober for them is really important. And I think she's also trying to
be the parent.
Yeah, have some sort of maternal impact in a way that she didn't once. And she gets so self-righteous with Rhiannon about how to raise the kids and how to discipline them, and you're letting them stay up too late. And Rhiannon and me are like, Mum, we were literally in foster care. Settle down.
Sit down.
They can be on the iPad for an hour. Yeah, it's so funny. She gets really she's definitely living out a kind of maternal fantasy dream, whatever with it. But I'm not going to deny that she is great with the grandkids. She's so good with them.
It's a second chance, isn't it?
It is. And I think it's been a really healthy thing for her. It's kept her on a path that she would have gone down a very different, worse path if not for the grandkids, for sure.
My dad was the same. When my brother had kids, he became the father that we never got.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I've never spoken to my brother about it because both of our trauma is very different, even though it was exactly the same.
Yeah.
They say that, you can all be in the exact same house, and you say that you bring your children up together, but every single child has a different story.
Yeah.
And every single parent has a different story of how they brought up a child or where they were, because everyone is at a different place every day of their lives, trying to live together, trying to be that codependency in a house. But watching my dad, I could only talk to my mum about it and say, I was just so angry. And I still am. I still have just so much anger that they got what I didn't get, and that I had to watch him be this beautiful grandfather, but just cut off the grand, just be this beautiful father that I never got. And watch it happening right in front of me. And then, the kids saying something or doing something wrong and him not hurting them. I couldn't reconcile it. I was like, I don't know why aren't you hitting? I would get hit for that, and I'd be say to my mum, I don't understand. Why didn't I, and my poor mother, she was just in the middle of it all. But that's, you were just saying before therapy, my God, therapy, is that just not the best invention in the world?
Thank God for therapy.
Thank our lives for therapy.
Yeah. Truly, and
wouldn't be alive.
I'm so lucky. I was initially sent to a child psychiatrist because I was 17 when I started getting PTSD symptoms, and I still see him now, and I'm 37. So it's been essentially 20 years. And there have been times over that 20 years that I've not been able to afford it, and he's just let me continue coming. And
that's how it should be.
Yeah, he's been really great that way. And, you know, I've had friends say things to me like, you know, Rosie, you've been going for 15 years. Like, if he was good, wouldn't you not be going anymore? Like,
that doesn't work
and it's
like that.
so hard to explain to people. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. The consistency that he has offered me, sort of, especially with traumatized children and particularly with neglected children, I think he very much knew, and it's why he let me keep coming at times when I couldn't afford it, is that the relationship you have with a therapist sort of rewires your brain into believing that there are consistent adults in your life who will be there for you.
Yes.
So I think that he always stuck with me because of that. But also it takes time. Like there have been periods, like I've had the last couple of years, a rough time mental health wise. And I just was thinking, oh my God, like I'm 35, this is still happening. Like why? But the major thing I've learned the last few months in particular is that I've looked at how I've handled things getting difficult, and I've handled it so much better than I would have 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago. And that is just something that takes time. And I was saying to him just last week, I've recently gone through a breakup about a month ago, and you know, I've had to move and it's been hard and just all the usual painful things that come with a breakup. And I said to him, you know, Stephen, I think I've realised I'm doing forward motion and I'm trying to just keep going and I don't feel the best. Like I'm pretty sad, but like I think I just have to feel shit for a while. And he said, yeah. And I said, like, I can see like I've got things on the horizon. I've got deadlines that I'm finishing now, so books that will be coming out next year, and you know, things will get better. But right now I'm feeling so shit, but the only way through it is to just be through it. The only way through shit is to be in the shit. Yeah. And he kind of looked at me like his magnum opus was finally like realizing, like it was like 20 years. Yes. Rosie. Yes. Like he was so like, it was like, he just couldn't believe that it was, finally coming together. She's getting
the lighting changed and there was a spotlight on you all of a sudden.
Like you can't, therapy isn't about learning how to be happy all the time. It's about learning how to and trusting that you are capable of being okay when things are shit.
Victoria is a financial advisor.
Ex-financial advisor. We quit that to focus on my love of dogs. Yes.
You are a woman after my own heart. So, dogs, Victoria.
Oh, that's what this podcast is about. How we can afford more dogs.
Yes, because you have
good budgeting, my friend. I'm here for it.
I'm here for all of it. You're a podcaster. You're an author. You run She's on the Money and is the co-director and founder of Zella Money.
Yep.
Thank you for being my guest. I love finances and things like that, especially when it comes to women, because of the amount of women mid-aged.
The biggest rising group of people experiencing homelessness is women above the age of 55,
yes.
Which to me is absolutely cooked, completely unacceptable.
And this is what I thought you would be really passionate about. And
wildly.
I said to my producer, I want to talk to her about that.
You're
because
so kind.
This is something, I'm 50, and this is something that's really, it's happening to people I know.
Yeah.
And I know, you know, I'm a big anti-patriarchal thing, like, because of this is the reality of women's futures if they kind of buy into that whole stay at home, look after the man and let them do all the financial stuff. And then when they are done with you and they move on, you're pretty much left with nothing. Like they don't get their super or they don't have anything.
It's because they usually, so like say, you know, I chose not to work and, you know, my husband might be the breadwinner and we might be in the best relationship ever, right? Like nobody gets into these situations because they go, do you know what I want? I would love to be homeless at 55. That just sounds like a dream. Nobody says that, right? And I think that if you're sitting here and you're looking at circumstances like this or you're going through a divorce that's completely unforeseen, That's the point. Like, you never expected that. Like, you might have gone through your entire life with this person. You've brought up kids, they're now in their 30s. Like, who saw this coming? Definitely not me, definitely not you. So I think looking at it and going, well, actually, we had a whole heap of things that didn't serve us along the way. So first things first, you might have had a breadwinner partner who just paid all the bills. And you might have been like, money win, I don't have to do any of that. Also, admin win, I hate admin. So not having to pay the bills, great. But do you know how to pay the bills? Like, if I said, hey, you know, this isn't working out, can you just pay the electricity? Do you actually know how to do that? If you don't, it's not about taking back control and yelling at your partner. It's actually about going, all right, well, what does that process look? Just so that you can learn and be across it. And obviously being out of the workforce for a significant period of time means you're not accruing superannuation, which is what most women retire with being their biggest asset. And that's what they rely on for their retirement. And if you haven't been contributing to that, then what have you got to fall back on if you haven't been saving and investing on the outside? Because that's actually really unobtainable. How many of us actually have the funds to do that? That's why super exists. So it's about these conversations of going, okay, well, if you wanted to be out of the workforce, are we having our husbands or our partners contribute to our superannuation in our absence from the workforce? Because that's entirely possible.
It is?
It is entirely possible for your partner to be contributing to your super. And you could say, well, actually, financially it works out because we get some tax benefits. I feel really secure. Obviously, in a perfect world, you and I are going to stay in love and married for our entire life, in which case that retirement pot, it's ours when we retire. So, mate, you're not missing out on anything. You're actually getting some tax benefits along the way. It's a red flag if you don't want to contribute it, because I go, well, what's your plan, buddy?
Yeah.
Why are you so worried about missing out on if we're planning to death do us part?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I think it's one of those things where these conversations need to be had.
They do.
And they need to be had sooner and earlier. And even those, I think they're small things, and I know they're not small things, but just going, hey, have you got an emergency fund? You might go, no.
Yeah, that's a big one for me.
We're really rich.
Yeah.
We don't need an emergency fund. I've got a credit card. Like, my husband will give me money anytime I want. Okay, but like, what if the proverbial hit the fan and you needed to get out of a place or a situation or literally anything? Do you have funds? Because I promise, I've seen it time and time again, and it breaks my heart. Women going, yeah, I had a credit card, but he cancelled it. And now I have no access to any cash, no access to buy anything. Can't even put fuel in my car. And you go, this is insane, because from the outside looking in, you're incredibly wealthy, but you don't have access to the money.
Yes.
So it's all about just these small things that along the way don't feel small, but when you look back on them, you go, those are the sticking points. Like, if I just had a couple of grand in, you know, my own savings account, hopefully for a rainy day that never comes, that would be fantastic. If I knew how to pay the bills, I don't have to do it. Let's be honest. No one wants more life admin if we don't have to do it.
But, you know, even just learning to pay a bill, if you lose your husband to a death,
and
is something that all of a sudden you have to learn how to,
we can be real morbid here, actually, if I'm allowed.
Please.
Women live longer than men.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so like at some point it's going to be on you, babe.
Yeah, that's right.
So whether you like it or not, whether you get a divorce or not, it's going to be you at some point, statistically. Not because I want it to be, that's awful.
No.
But more because that's just the reality of the circumstance.
It is. It really is. Now, before you even get married, you obviously believe that a woman should have her own account.
100%.
I do as well.
100%.
And what about...
Call it a squirrel fund. We're squirreling money away for a rainy day.
Yeah.
And squirrels always forget about their nuts, so it's all good.
Yeah. So if you had a bank account, and you got married and the husband said, look, I'm going to take care of everything, you don't even have to disclose that you have an account,
absolutely not. Why would you have to tell anybody that?
And say you were a stay-at-home mum then, and so you weren't having an income. What would you do with that fund, like that account?
Just sits there dormant.
Like making interest?
Oh, I mean, if you're a smart, savvy lady, you've got it in a high-interest savings account, just like bopping away to beat inflation, hopefully. But it can just be some cash sitting to the side that just makes you feel safe. In fact, from my perspective, as much as, you know, I don't believe you should have to disclose it, I don't think that your partner should ever be threatened by it. It's a red flag for me if your partner goes, wait, why have you got money sitting to the side? Hold on, mate, why don't you?
Yeah.
Like the same thing could happen to you, like unless you somehow think that this is a power trip, in which case we need to talk about this.
Yeah.
So I just think obviously it would be great if it was all just in the clarity of the world. You just know that I've got an emergency fund.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
I think in today's day and age, women have our own bank accounts. We have had for about 40 years now, like legally allowed to, where our husband doesn't have to sign it off.
100%. I remember talking to my mum. I'm obviously a business owner, wildly passionate about it. Feel very lucky to be living in 2023 where I don't have anything that comes up against me when it comes to me going down to the bank and opening another bank account. And I was sitting down talking to my mum about banking one day. Really boring conversation, but when you are an ex-financial advisor, those are the dinner table conversations.
Yes.
My mum was a coroner, so like the dinner table conversations went a real different way after I was done speaking.
Oh, my God, I'd love to go down that rabbit hole.
Insane. But I remember saying, I did this, this and this today. And my mum's like, you're so lucky. When I started my first business, because she bought a general store in her early 20s and thought, I'm just going to be, a business lady in Tasmania. Yeah, on her own.
I love your mother.
They made her dad go down and co-sign for the loan to make sure that she could buy that. And if you look back on it, like the women in my family are the women who kind of like hold up the economics of the family. So like my grandpa, really great guy, but he grew up as a farmer, dropped out of school earlier. He definitely had dyslexia because my nana did all the banking and the bookkeeping and stuff for him. Yeah. But for some reason, the bank saw him as the guy that was definitely more trustworthy than my mum, who was, down the line, had all these books, had all these spreadsheets of what she was going to do and how she was going to start her business. But she can't be trusted.
That's offensive.
Because my friend, she's not male.
It's offensive to me.
It's wild when you start to break it down and go,
my mother was
insane.
The smarts.
Yeah.
She was elevated through school really quickly. Like she was a genius child. And then she married my father, who then made her quit her job. But, she ended up having to work again because his building business wasn't a business. He was a tradie. Never worked, didn't work properly because we had massive floods at times. And so she ended up having to go back to work. And she was so smart. She started as a receptionist for a guy running a travel company and ended up running the company within 5 years. Of course she did get it, Mum. Yeah. And she died in 2016. And it wasn't until after she died that I could see exactly what was going on. Oh. My father, immigrant, still can't really read or write that well. Yeah. That's when I noticed, Mum had been doing everything. She was really carrying him.
Mum, she's definitely listening. She knows you know.
Yes.
She's like, yeah, I know you know now.
Yes.
I just wanted to stay humble, babe.
But it was so awful because he really did keep her held down in that, and she did it to keep the peace. I know that, and because she comes from an age where she was born in 1948, where by the time she was married in the 60s, that's what you did. You did not embarrass your husband by appearing to be the smarter one.
Oh, of course not.
So offensive.
Imagine embarrassing men.
You're married.
I am.
So you obviously have a very progressive man in your life.
I do.
What does he do?
He is a digital marketing head of in a retail company.
And that's all I want to talk about, a man on this.
Do you know what? He's a fancy pants, but, you mentioned before, I'm pregnant. I'm not the one taking parental leave. He is. He's going to take 6 months off work. In fact, he would like to take more, but I'm like, let's just see how we go. Like, I'm very, very lucky to have a man who was raised by a staunch feminist.
Wonderful. So you found him. You found the one. I love that.
Did.
If only we could clone him.
Look, a lot of people have asked. Yeah. I prefer not because it might become quite confusing for me. But
how wonderful
so
would it
far,
be for
so
us? Oh, wow. I love that. And that he was raised by a staunch feminist. I can't believe that. I mean, I can believe that someone like you has found such a wonderful man like that. It's just such a shame there's not more of them.
There needs to
be
more.
We talk about this all the time, all of these men with the coercive control and the, monetary control. Like there's so much of it going on in family violence and domestic violence and things like that. I do want to ask you about the recession.
Yes.
Are we in a recession?
Oh, we're headed for a recession.
We are.
I think so. So it depends. If you ask some economists, we are absolutely headed for a recession. Some economists now are going to say, no, we're coming back off it. Today is a Tuesday, and it was announced earlier today that there has been another rate freeze, which is very sexy if you're me and you get excited about that stuff.
I don't have a mortgage or anything, but I get really angry with the RBA because I know people who do.
Yeah, and it puts a lot of financial pressure on a lot of families, right? You look at it and you just go, I get why they're doing it. So they raise the rates in order to cap inflation. So inflation is how much goods and services are increasing by, and over time that has increased significantly. So you would have heard the uproar earlier this year about HEX being indexed at 7.1%. That's because it was reflective of our indexation rate. And that was honestly way too high. And if we didn't do anything about it when it comes to cash, it just would have kept increasing and thus been even more crippling on our economy than the rate increases, right? So what the RBA is doing, albeit very painful, is very good for us.
Right.
Because it might feel like you are absolutely being crippled by the mortgage. And I know on an individual level, it's awful. Yep. But what that has meant is that indexation hasn't been able to increase and inflation hasn't been rising as much. So the costs of your goods and services, you would have noticed, has kind of plateaued. I feel like over the last 18 months, coffee particularly, like I'm now paying like $6.50 for my regular oat latte. Like, are you joking?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
But a year ago, 18 months ago, that was $5, right?
So in the grand scheme of things, that's not that large.
Well, I mean, to me, it's really large. If you drink as much coffee as I am, it's actually quite financially crippling. But you look at it and go, all right, well, that is an increase in costs of goods and services. And as much as our mortgages are costing us a lot of money, I would actually prefer for everyone to just have a reasonable grocery bill. And that's what the RBA is trying to do by increasing the cash rate, because they go, no. If the world is more expensive and cash is more expensive to get hold of, people are going to stop buying big things.
Yeah, that just makes sense,
Yeah,
doesn't
they're going to stop buying the big things so we can focus on the small and focus on small business and focus on our economy getting back on its feet. So are we headed for a recession? I mean, at the start of the year, I would have said unequivocally yes. Yeah. But with another rate freeze, I look at it and go, do you know what? We might just scrape out of it. One of the cool things about living in Australia and having, I guess, the Australian economy is we kind of live in a bubble. We're very, very lucky that we live in a world where a lot of our produce doesn't have to be imported in. Yeah. So we're a relatively self-sufficient country. We also have a lot of exports. I mean, we could talk about it all day because I get very excited about it, but I won't. So I think we live in this kind of economic bubble where if you see something really bad going on in America, it might hit us here, but it never hits us as hard.
Right.
So if you look back to the GFC, which happened in 2008, 2009, we know that was financially crippling.
Yeah.
But way more so for America than for Australia. And the, I guess, impacts in Australia were really driven by what was going on in the American economy. So we look at it and go, all right, it sucks. I totally get it. And on individual levels, you might look at this and go, but Victoria, like I had to sell my investment property. I had to do this. I had to do that. It sucks, but that's also a privilege in this economy to be able to have that flexibility. And unfortunately, those things were an investment, and sometimes investments don't make financial sense. And when you signed up to that, you knew that if interest rates were going to increase, that would be maybe a likely outcome. So I don't want to be rude about it, you could say.
Please
but
be.
I also want to go, all right, well, actually, I'd much prefer us to look over to the single mums who are really struggling to put food on the table and, you know, the elderly who are like, I only get a certain amount of pension and that pension did not go up with inflation this year.
Yeah.
So that 7.1% means our pensioners are putting 7.1% less on their tables each and every single day.
Yeah.
So to me, that's really important.
You sound to me
a little bit crazy. Yeah,
no,
I
God,
get it all the time.
Me? Are you kidding me? You sound like a socialist, not a capitalist.
No, I'm not a capitalist.
You really...
Please never call me that.
No,
I would be very
just,
sad.
I just think more of you.
Oh, thank you.
If we could clone you and your husband,
because I told
actually.
you before that I really want more dogs?
That was the beginning of my love affair with you. But no, like you seem to be exactly where I want us to go in the world, like especially in this country. But financially, you know, I mean, you just spoke about an investment property. Like I have a real thing about negative gearing and all of that kind of thing. Can you explain why just went on a tour to Darwin, and I had a woman sitting next to me, and I said, bloody negative gearing. She goes, I have an investment property. I'm worked really hard all my life to, and I was like, but if we got rid of the negative gearing, wouldn't we be doing better?
Yeah.
Is that true?
It depends. It's also, when we look at the property market here in Australia, I mean, we've been colonised for 200 years.
Yes.
So you look at our economy and go, wow, we've been building property and selling property on land for the last 200 years. You go over to America, you go to Europe, you go anywhere internationally, and they've been doing it for thousands of years. So the expectations overseas are very, very different to what they are here. So you look overseas, and actually one of the main expectations, and I think it's like 57% of people globally rent.
Yeah.
But then you go to like more dense locations like Canada and the US, and it goes up to close to 80% of people actually rent. And I mean, they have better lease terms than we do. We need to talk about that as well.
Because owning a property can be a business, and the people that own the big, they use it as a business, whereas the investment, like the baby boomer investment properties that, with the rent, that is
So we've got the great Australian dream, right?
Yes.
And that's that everybody in our economy here in Australia can buy their white picket fence. They can have their 2.6 children and a dog, and they can have a stay-at-home partner. Also, you know what they can do? They can go on one international holiday every 2 years, and they can also drive to Queensland with a family in the back every year, right? We've got to go to the theme parks. That is what we have set as our expectation.
Yes.
Internationally, that is not true. Owning a property for a lot of people internationally is just not a reality. It's too expensive, and a lot of it is kind of like a business. A lot of it is owned by the ultra wealthy. And I'm not saying that that's right.
No.
I'm just saying that our expectations have been set by 200 years in their space, which is not that long.
Right.
So when you look at it, you go, all right, well, should you be able to negatively gear a property? In Australia, there is no way that today property is going to increase in the way that it has over the last 40 years. So I did a piece of research the other day because, as I said before, I am crazy and also a nerd. And in 1975, the average property price in Sydney was $31,000-ish, right? Very sexy.
Yep.
It is now 27 times the median income in Sydney, and it historically was just 4 times. Just 4 times the average income.
Yeah.
And so we did the maths. I tried to terrify my team, and I said, all right, well, that makes sense. Like, you guys understand inflation, but what you don't understand is that incomes have not increased with inflation. If our incomes increased with inflation, we would have an average income of $172,000 a year. But we don't, though. It's 65,000, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
right. But we have the same expectations that were set back in 1975, don't we? Because we want what our parents had.
Yeah, we all just want a home.
Not going to happen.
It's not, is it?
Let's be realistic. So is negative gearing a thing that is possible now? Yes. Is it a lot harder now? Yes, because we don't have the cash flow to support that. And historically, if you had 4 times your income and a good income, you could create your own little property portfolio and absolutely make bank. But nowadays, I think there's an overlay, very importantly, of ethics, and whether that is an ethical investment model and whether you should be going down that route when it actually keeps a lot of people out of the market. So there's, and I like to think that I'm the type of person that my job is just to put the facts on the table and go, all right, well, here's what I do. I do technically have an investment property, but it's also, once you have that, how do you be an ethical landlord? What does that mean? How do you not take the mickey and absolutely, I've had friends who've had their rents increased by like $500 a week here in Melbourne. Yeah. And you just go, that's not an ethical landlord. No. That's a landlord that has looked at their mortgage and said, I can't afford this anymore. And instead of admitting that an investment is a risk, and sometimes that risk means you can no longer afford to service it and probably should dispose of that asset, they're trying to take advantage of other people. And you go, no, that's not it at all. So I think it's a bigger conversation of whether negative gearing should or shouldn't exist. Yes, it technically still does. There are going to be properties around Australia that are still negatively geared because they were purchased so cheap in like 1975.
Yeah.
But today, purchasing a property and expecting it to be negatively geared, it's kind of like a pipe dream.
Please head to Apple Podcasts, rate, review, subscribe, all the things. Thanks for listening. See you soon. Well, listen to me soon.